You know, my wife's the only person I ever told.
I never told anybody, not my parents, not my brother, not my best friends, not my wife. Nobody.
I go in tears talking about it now. It's affected me. I'd like to think it hasn't affected me. I like to think I can tough it out and everything's okay. It has affected me. I will admit to it. You just saw a little bit of it now. I can't watch the bomb.
The morning of July 5th, 1957, about 4 in the morning, they put us in a trench. I think it was a mile from ground zero or less. I was in a platoon with 40 other people, and we had for protection, we just had our utility jackets, our weapons, helmets, and a gas mask.
We followed the instructions, which were to crouch down, put our backs towards the shot, and bow our heads and cover our eyes.
And we got to the point that everybody was basically in the trenches. They started the countdown. They went 59, 58, 57.
I got my gas mask on. I had trouble cinching it down, and it got down to 9. I grabbed my helmet, put it up to my head about like that, and the bomb went off.
It really was the most, I'll never experience anything like it again. I know that.
It was completely daylight at midnight, brighter than the brightest day you ever saw.
I cannot begin to describe the light that came into my eye. I was totally blinded. When I came out of the blindness, I saw my hands, and by this time I actually saw the blood vessels in my bones in my arm, because as I came across like this, it actually was totally x-rayed.
You could literally just see every bone in there, everything. Even the guy's bones in the back that was in front of you.
And it felt just like you would take a red hot iron, like you iron with an iron on an ironing board, and put it to your neck.
There was extreme heat, extreme heat. There was people screaming and running. There was panic. There was panic and people screaming because of the heat.
Everybody started yelling, and some people calling out for their mothers, and some of the trenches collapsed.
A few guys were having a little trouble. They were throwing up. It was a normal thing, I guess.
We had to dig 2 guys out, and we're standing there watching the mushroom cloud form, and you could see it with the naked eyes. It sucked all the sand up.
There was people were gathering then, kind of coming back and looking at this spectacular shot.
It actually, you're gonna die when I tell you this. It was so big. The colors were beautiful in a sense. I hate to say that. You see this molten cloud changing color as it kind of turns within itself.
Beautiful purples and lavenders and popping and blipping and just doing.
Woods, I think he defecated in his pants and all kinds of weird stuff.
And I seen some guys coming towards us, like to the right of us, towards the bomb even. Like they were walking towards us as we were walking to the left of the blast. And I thought, what are they wearing? They have some kind of different clothes on, because things were dangling like they had padded clothes or something. It looked odd. And through some other people and talking over the years, I think it was their flesh Nobody had uniforms that dangled like that.
It haunts me to think of what I had witnessed and not realized at the time the import of what we were doing at the time, actually serving as guinea pigs.
We were just, it was like an experiment animal to use in a lab. And I think a lot of my lumps and that and nodules I've had taken out of my body is due to that.
I had developed a tumor in '04 when I went down and registered as an atomic vet. And it turned out that the tumor was called schwannoma tumor. It was caused by ionized radiation. And for 10 years now, I've been trying to get compensation for that, but the government does not want to admit to anybody that was harmed by any radiation. They've been putting me off for over 10 years now. The only thing that they did for us was swore us to secrecy. We couldn't talk about it. We couldn't talk about it to anybody for $10,000 fine or 10 years in prison.
Everyone was told that you're never, ever to discuss this again.
They put the fear of God in you. When you start talking about treason, you could be executed. That's enough to. I mean, go to jail is one thing, but treason.
It's quite a cover-up. It's been a cover-up for over 50 years.
I call it mass genocide. And I mean it that way. I think it can be only described as genocide. You don't send 14,000 troops through ground zero and not call it anything but genocide. Somebody knew what was occurring.
There's been a lot of people that died. I would venture to say that there was more people killed in the testing, not immediately, but over the 50-year period of our silence, that there were probably more people killed from the testing than there was in Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
In a paper published by the Journal of Applied Physics in 2018, a team of scientists did some research on the Great Pyramid and found that electromagnetic energy was present in some of the chambers when stimulated.
This experiment used very long wavelength radio waves, and it actually caused these waves to be focused into certain regions. They realized that the pyramid shape might actually act as a lens or a focusing mechanism for radio frequency energy.
One of the things that's interesting, of course, when looking at the Great Pyramid as a possible coupling to energy sources, is to ask, could it have been coupling somehow to seismic or sound vibrations in the Earth? I think the real question would be, what type of energy were they trying to focus, or how would they leverage it?
The Great Pyramid sits very close to a fault line, so almost like it absorbs seismic energy and then gives it back out again. So it could have been a generator of Earth energies that then would spread out through the landscape.
Was the Great Pyramid constructed to channel power from the Earth? While the idea may sound fantastic, it is one that was pursued by a man who is credited as one of the inventors of modern electricity, Nikola Tesla.
Nikola Tesla is one of the great geniuses of the last century. He wanted to create wireless technology, not with radio, but through the planet Earth. And that's why he built this gigantic tower in Shoreham, Long Island. Some people think that maybe he got inspiration for his gigantic antenna from the pyramids of Giza.
The pyramids don't look today the way they did thousands of years ago when they were first built, but they had on the top of the pyramid some conductive material that made it shiny on the top. And that's very much like the Wardenclyffe Tower transmitters, that you had a conductive surface on the top of the tower. And it's really interesting that the height of the pyramid to the base of the pyramid is the height that Tesla wanted to build his Wardenclyffe Tower. Well, due to monetary reasons, he built a scaled version of it, and he didn't build it as high as he wanted it to and as large as he wanted to. Tesla wanted it built over a flowing aquifer. He said this allowed him to grip the Earth in order to transmit this power from one location to another. I find it intriguing that the pyramids are very similar. So it's very likely that if the pyramids were built for some purpose of absorbing and capturing and harnessing energy from the Earth, that's what Tesla was trying to reproduce.
Sometimes we have to look beyond what might seem like logical and think illogically. The question is, did Tesla get knowledge from the pyramids, or are the pyramids there for other purposes?
Hi, yeah, I'm Gerard Williams, author with Simon Dunson of a book called Grey Wolf, The Escape of Adolf Hitler. I've been a television journalist with some excursions into print for the last 40 years. He shoots himself in the head, probably at the same time as crunching a cyanide pill. Ava Braun takes a cyanide pill on a sofa in their personal quarters. And the bodies are then found by one of his valets, and the bodies are then taken upstairs, covered in petrol. The petrol is set fire to, and the body's burned to ashes. Yeah, well, that doesn't work because you need to get a body to something like 3000 C in a crematorium before it goes to ashes. When the Russians arrive, they find no bodies like this. They do a bit later, funnily enough, but they don't find any bodies at the time. And the BBC reporter Thomas Cadet, who's there, says the Russians have been given no bodies that they believe to be that of Adolf Hitler. There is no mention of Ava Braun at all. And yet over there are Joseph and Magda Goebbels, and they've been covered with petrol, and they've been set alight, and you can still tell it's Joey the Crip, as they used to call him, and Magda. We have the reports from Captain Peter Baumgart. Baumgart's arrested, but as part of his defense, he explains his war history and everything else, and at the end of the war, he flew Hitler and Ava and a number of other people to Tonda in Denmark. He sees them board another plane and fly them off to Reus, just outside Barcelona. General Franco is very tight with Hitler, and so he supplies an aircraft of the Spanish Air Force, which flies them to Fuerteventura, to Villa Winter, and from Villa Winter they board a convoy of 3 submarines. When they get to the coast, they stay overnight at a ranch called Morimar, and then on Morimar, and it's still there, at the Estancia, is an airfield, and they fly from that airfield to a place just outside San Carlos de Bariloche, which is owned by the Nazi ambassador to Chile. You might think this is all just completely crazy, right? But I've spoken to eyewitnesses. I've walked on the Estancia. At one stage, an Argentine crew was filming there because they'd heard this story as well. And the woman said, "What are you filming that house for?" And they said, "Well, isn't that the one that Hitler stayed in after the war?" She went, No, it's that one over there. Jaw drop. And you get stories like this all the time. Sometimes they're secondhand. Sometimes they're third hand. But I've interviewed, I suppose now, about 10 people who met him personally in Argentina, post-war. I've had 2 eyewitnesses threatened with death threats in Argentina. One who was threatened with having their house burnt down and their children killed. And then another lady who said she had pictures and a signed copy of Mein Kampf dated 1958. She shut up on us completely because she got a telephone calling saying the Gestapo is still active, and if you continue talking to these people, you will die. Unless the story was true or had any basis in fact, why would you threaten people with death? First of all, I have to say it's not a theory. Simple as that. I don't do conspiracy theories. I've been called everything from a conspiracy theorist to a nutter. The whole Hitler died in the bunker, killed himself, Ava Braun killed herself as well, has become so accepted. When you even vaguely try and challenge it, it's like you're challenging the existence of God to a Catholic priest. Historians like to follow other historians and accept their work because it's been peer-reviewed. I like to follow journalists who are actually on the ground doing it at the time. Prove me wrong. Prove us wrong. Prove the research wrong. And then, maybe we could have a conversation over a beer about it. But in the meantime, I know what I know.
In 1928, in a desert on the Paracas Peninsula on the south coast of Peru, archaeologist Julio Tello unearthed a graveyard filled with the remains of corpses with the largest elongated skulls found anywhere in the world. Some were dated back as far as 3,000 years. This discovery shocked scientific communities because it challenged what had been recorded in Peruvian and human history. Tello's discovery has since become known as the Paracas skulls.
What exactly they are will require rigorous scientific examination. We were able to do DNA testing of a baby that died at 18 months and had strawberry blonde hair, which is not Native American. And the analysis that was done indicated that it had segments of DNA that do not match anything known to be human.
Skeptics have long dismissed the validity of the remains found with elongated skulls as being scientific proof of pre-Adamites. They claim that these skulls are artificial, an objection made even more complicated by the fact that there have been tribes who practiced cranial deformation on infants.
When it comes to the discovery of elongated heads, a lot of the mainstream scientists might shrug it off and say, well, this is an indication of binding. They believe that humans bound their skulls to make themselves look like they had these massive heads, which doesn't quite make sense unless you actually did have some kind of gods who had those heads and you were trying to imitate those heads.
A cranial deformation is where a newborn child's head is bound, usually with something like leather or possibly wood on the front and back, wrapped with some kind of textile. So by 3 years old, the child's skull is completely bone, and then therefore throughout their life they maintain that design. It was done in order to differentiate physically the nobility from the common class. But you can distinguish between cranial deformation and what I'm talking about. You see the obvious flattening of the front and back of the skull with cranial deformation. I've studied this subject about elongated skulls for about 8 years. And as I said, they did exist on all 6 inhabited continents, but almost all of them are the example of cranial deformation, which is changing the shape of the skull. However, in the case of the Paracas, we have the largest elongated skulls ever found on the planet, and that makes the Paracas culture very specifically interesting. We've even found baby skeletons where the skull is elongated. There was one recently I saw of a probably 3-month-old, and its head was twice the size of normal. So it's not just that the shape is different, the volume is different. And many medical experts have looked at these and they've said you can change the shape of a baby's head because it's very soft to begin with, but you can't increase the volume. So that by itself is telling us we're looking at a genetic variation.
Artifacts found in recent archaeological digs at the cave suggest that the Denisovans were not only large, but highly intelligent. Some scientists, like Jack Carey, believe they had the ability to create sophisticated technology.
The Denisovans had to be much more advanced than what they're being credited with. I say that because of the discovery of a piece of jewelry that they found in the original Denisovan cave that dated 40,000 years ago. It was made of a green polished rock, and anthropologists believe that this jewelry was only worn on very special occasions. That indicates a culture. It indicates art. It indicates a higher understanding of reality. These aren't people that were simply clubbing animals to death and using their furs. These were people that were literally constructing jewelry. That's something a lot of anthropologists are uneasy with because it shows a depth of understanding and beauty in their culture that really shouldn't have existed with such ancient hominids.
The archaeologists kept digging a bit more, as they tend to do, and they found that when they got to a layer that's about 380,000 years, they found tools there, they found a needle, they found certain artifacts that looks like bracelets and other ornaments, and they also found a ring which has been beautifully shaped out of rock. It has been obviously machined and polished.
Beautiful bone needles have been found in the Denisova cave, suggesting that the Denisovans wore tailored clothing. Horse DNA has also been found inside the cave itself, suggesting that the Denisovans not only hunted horses, but probably domesticated them and may even have ridden horses. And this is probably tens of thousands of years before it was even thought possible that you could ride horses, something that was considered conventionally to only have occurred in Bronze Age times. And yet here we have people 40 to 50,000 years ago who were riding horses, domesticating them, catching them,